Hi, y'all. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to talk about one of my favorite femtech devices, which is the Temp Drop. The Temp Drop is a wearable basal body temperature tracker. You put it on your arm at nighttime, turn it on, and then sync it to your phone in the morning. It does all the hard work for you. Unlike your average oral thermometer, this tracks your temperature throughout the night. So if you don't get good sleep, like some of us postpartum moms with young children, this will help you tag on the biomarker of your temperature to help you with tracking your fertility and knowing where you're at in your cycle. Throughout the month of July, TempDrop is doing a special sale in honor of their 8th year anniversary. On their website, you will get 20% off. You can add on my code AF Open to Life for an additional 15% off. My code STACKS for a total of 35% off. So click on my link, use my code, get that 35% off the Temp Drop. Surely now is the time to invest in knowing your body. Now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Open to Life podcast. This is episode 15, and today I am with Christina Valenzuela, the creator of Pearl and Thistle. Welcome, Christina. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you, Melanie. I'm so excited to chat with you, and I love your energy. I'm filming at like 8 o'clock at night, and I'm just going to absorb it all.
I so appreciate you taking the time, and I'm glad that this is a reality. I've been following Christina on Instagram for several years, and I feel like during the COVID era, maybe a lot of NFP fertility content creation kind of took off. And I think that was probably when I first started following you. So it's been a few years of kind of following along through the socials. So I'm glad to be chatting with you and see you, kind of in person on the screen.
Right? Yeah, I've been following you for a while too, so it's funny. We're like, whoa, we're having an actual conversation in real time.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yay. So I have been watching some of your courses through Pearl and Thistle, and I know that Pearl and Thistle is meant for Catholics of all ages and stages. So maybe can you tell us a little bit on what inspired you to start Pearl and Thistle and what's the mission of this ministry?
Yeah, so Pearl and Thistle is kind of the big umbrella organization that I use to deliver all of my body literacy education content. So a lot of that is pre-recorded videos, some are books, and then I also do natural family planning coaching one-on-one. So that's kind of where it got started initially. I've been certified in the Boston Crosscheck method as an instructor since 2013. So it's been a little while. And I did that very quietly for a number of years, kind of in the background while I was working for parishes and for campus ministries and things throughout the church. And then when I stepped away from full-time ministry, I was like, what am I going to do? I have kids at home. My husband's working. I still want to stay active. So I started putting myself out there a little bit more with the NFP instruction. And then that's where I started getting the ideas for like, how would we build this out? How could this be different? How could we be serving more people? Because I'm sure in the work that you do and kind of your fertility awareness fangirling that you do, you're aware that we don't get a lot of this information in a very timely manner, right? If we get information about our menstrual cycles and ovulation and fertility, it's usually in the context of like marriage prep. But boy, could we use it a lot sooner. And so that's really why Pearl and Thistle exists, is to introduce this information sooner and to carry on education and support throughout a couple's entire reproductive lives, because fertility shifts as we age and as things change.
Yeah. I look back at when I first learned about periods, and I feel like all what that was taught to me was you will one day get your menstrual cycle, you'll start bleeding, you may want to use a pad, and there's different sizes. And once you start bleeding, that means that you have the capacity to become pregnant. And that was that. And I feel like it was very hush hush. I remember, I mean, still to this day, I can think of a couple friends that still whisper, like, do you have a pad? It felt very taboo. And through my work in the pro-life movement is how I learned about this world of NFP, fertility awareness. And similar to many girls' and women's reactions, I also thought, geez, why didn't I learn this sooner? Where has this been my whole life? And I definitely think through the work of what you're doing, especially through your cycle prep course, helping young girls and families to be able to talk about, especially that first menstrual cycle, I think can help eliminate that taboo and make it less scary and dirty, something that needs to be whispered about. Maybe I'm jumping the gun there. I just think that
No,
these
I
is
think
like normal bodily functions, and we don't need to be afraid to like say, "Hey, do you have a pad or a tampon?" You know?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can look at research going back all the way to the 90s when people were asking questions about, like, how do we educate girls? How do we make puberty, especially for girls, a less anxiety inducing experience? And so they kind of looked at predictors for girls who had a really horrible experience going through puberty and girls who kind of navigate it with a lot more positivity. And surprise, surprise, what they found was they needed preparation and they needed affirmation. So the girls needed to be aware of the changes that were going to come so that they didn't freak out when something did happen. And then they also needed to have that affirmation to say, this is healthy, this is normal. You have somebody here supporting you who will help you through this. Like, these seem like really simple things, but when you break it down that way and you look at what most of us are getting, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that from our schools and even from parents who want to prepare and affirm but don't really know how sometimes because they never received it themselves.
Yeah, we have to be the change we want to see. I
There
have
you
a
go.
son right now, my firstborn. I definitely hope and pray if I have daughters one day that I will be that change with talking about body literacy and preparation for that first cycle and just normalizing all these conversations so that it's not one big awkward conversation, but just a
Absolutely.
lifetime of talking about the goodness of our bodies. So you have a definition of body literacy and how it connects to theology of the body. Could you define
Yeah.
body literacy for us?
Yeah. So, body literacy, when I was kind of looking around in honestly like secular fertility awareness spaces, this was a term that started coming up, body literacy. And what they meant by that was learning to read the signs that your body's giving you about cues related to fertility and ovulation. And I thought, oh, body literacy. I love this idea of reading your body. It's something to be received, right? It's not something to be manipulated, it's something to be understood. And I think there's a real wisdom in that. And I actually did my undergraduate work very heavily on the work of Pope St. John Paul II and theology of the body. And he has a phrase that he uses a lot called the language of the body. And so when I saw body literacy, I was like, this is it. This is one component that we can learn how our body speaks to us, how God has designed our body to speak to us, through this particular aspect of learning to read these cues of fertility. And I saw it as a natural avenue for opening up maybe a bigger understanding of the role of cycle charting and fertility literacy in the lives of Catholics than just the narrow space of natural family planning, if that makes sense.
Tell me, why could it be that cycle education is often neglected in the Catholic Church and Catholic spaces or even pro-life spaces? And what can we do to try to change that?
Ooh, I mean, I think you could probably contribute a lot to this conversation too, because it's probably very multifaceted.
Yeah.
So, the first thing I'll point out is that we are even now within the last 10, 15 years really learning to appreciate the importance of ovulation as a vital sign for women's health, right? And the cycle as an overall sign. So I don't think we really had that concept before. And so if we're trying to be practical about cycle education, we think, okay, where is it practical in the church? Where could it be practical in a pregnancy resource center specifically for family planning? Okay. So we've kind of built in those blinders. Now I think there's an invitation to shift that and to say, okay, well, more broadly, when we're serving women, how can this be helpful in helping women understand their own bodies and make informed choices and gain some peace in their bodies? Because let's be honest, cycles and fertility can be a real source of trauma or shame or things that we can,
Yeah.
that we need some healing. So I think that's maybe one reason.
Yeah, I think touching on why could it be that cycle education is neglected in pro-life spaces. I have a few theories with the cogs turning in my brain, the wheels turning. I feel like, for one, in the pro-life movement, it's a mix of different Christians from different theological and denominational backgrounds. And so with that comes disunity on dogma and, what do we all think about birth control? And I do think in the pro-life movement, for the most part, there is consensus on uh, being against birth control that can act as an embryocidal agent, abortifacient. But then there is disconnect on non-hormonal methods, such as condoms, female condom, etc., diaphragm, blah, blah, blah. And that really breaks my heart that there isn't unity on that. And so I think since there's just so much diverse opinions, because some people think, well, it is a pro-life option for people to use contraception so as to prevent the unexpected pregnancy, and therefore we're preventing abortion. But I believe data shows that people who seek abortions were on at least one or two types of birth control at the time of becoming pregnant. So for me, just knowing that, like, statistic, I feel like more birth control is not the answer to less abortion. And I just wish more pro-life people could see that and jump on the, yes, less birth control, please, and less birth control could possibly equal less abortion. But with that, I think the answer is body literacy, fertility awareness, and I want to believe that if more people came to know and love the truth on the way how their bodies were designed, then they would want to be careful. They would want to choose more wisely on who to enter into sex with. And hopefully, based off that rationale, then there would be kind of a slippery slope, just a snowball effect of, geez, well, if my body's made with so much value and I have just this wonderful superpower of fertility, then geez, maybe I don't want to share this superpower with just anybody. And geez, I might as well wait for my husband to share that superpower with. And that's my hope, that people could then come to that conclusion, and then maybe they would come to the Catholic faith at the end of all that. Yeah.
Can I actually tell you a story since we're on this? You illustrated it so well.
Yeah, tell me.
When I was developing this cycle prep course, right, my two oldest are girls, right? I've got girl, boy, girl is what we have right now. And so my two oldest girls were kind of helping me preview some materials together. Like, they were the right ages. Does this land with you? Does it not? So we had a lot of conversations about cycles and all this kind of stuff. And while all of this was happening, there was a pro-life march that was happening in Boston. And so I took my oldest daughter to that. And so we're driving on the way there, having these conversations, and the topic turned to, like, what are we marching for? And, just explaining the situation. So anyway, so we end up talking about abortion and we talk about birth control. And she's sitting there in the back seat and she goes, so hang on. So there's a thing that you can take that would turn off ovulation? And I said, yeah, that's basically it. And she said, but in cycle prep, we learn about how ovulation is an important part of your cycle and is really healthy. So why would anybody want to turn that off? And I was like, that's very interesting. She's like 11, right? We're having this
You
conversation.
go, girlfriend.
And mom's driving like, this is not a big deal. This is not a big deal. Totally a big deal. But then she goes, so what I know is that a baby can't be made unless there's an egg around. And the eggs don't live that long. So if somebody didn't want to get pregnant, wouldn't they just not have sex when the egg was around, but then they could have sex those other times?
Yeah.
She like invented natural family planning from the backseat of my
Wow.
Prius. Obviously, there's further conversations that we need to have about God's plan for marriage and sex and family planning and all of that and discernment. But like, as an 11-year-old, she got the concept.
Yeah.
Like, she was able to formulate it from like a natural law standpoint. And it just seemed very logical to her.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just put that in the check column. There's a lot of like X's in the mom columns, but that's a check.
Nice. Wow. That's such a good story. On that note, how should we begin conversations about cycles and fertility, especially with young girls?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's not one conversation. And I think that that's something that parents even sometimes have a hard time kind of figuring out, like, oh, if my daughter walks in on me while I'm changing a pad or something, like, what do I say? And so I have a program that's actually specifically for parents, which kind of talks through the body positive language that we cultivate in all of the programs that I use and how to use it at home. But very generally, we need to think about replacing kind of negative value judgments about our bodies with just positive speak in general whenever anything about bodies comes up, right? Not just cycles, but bodies in general, any bodily things, right? But when it comes to specifically cycles, we want to be very careful and we want to be telling the girls positive things like, your body was designed to do this. It's difficult work, it's complicated work, but it's good, healthy work. We avoid telling girls what to feel, right? Because they're going to feel whatever they feel. Some girls are going to feel excited about their first period. Some are going to feel anxious. Some are going to feel all sorts of other things, a mix of both, whatever. And we honor that. We hold that instead of telling them what to feel, which I think is where parents kind of overstep sometimes. What Cyclical does and the way that I approach it is just give them those body positive concepts, those logical groundwork, so that whatever they feel, they have something positive to come back to.
Okay, I really like how you said that, of having body positive language for our daughters, for young girls, and to say these things in a positive light, a positive lens. So on that, how then could we maybe talk with age appropriate language? Like, should we use words like vulva, vagina with young girls? Tell me your thoughts.
I mean, even from the standpoint of, yes, we absolutely should. Like, there are words, they are body parts, right? So as our kids get older, we teach them concepts like these are private body parts, right? That these, and they're not from shame, but out of value and respect for certain parts, right? But that they're not dirty words in and of themselves. And I think a lot of times as parents, we kind of feel that they're dirty words and we pass that on in the way that we say them or the way that we approach it.
Yeah.
But having worked even in a pregnancy resource center for a number of years, like, very unfortunately, we know that teaching improper terminology for body parts is one of the things that abusers will do, you know, and will prohibit kids from actually being able to report abuse and to be able to accurately say what has happened to them. So I think for many reasons, we can use the actual proper bodily terminology. But it's how we say that and how we're contextualizing that that really makes the difference for girls and for boys as well.
Yeah, totally. I'm all for calling body parts by their names, and I don't think that's dirty, but I guess it's almost controversial 'cause, like, oh my gosh, I'm just like thinking of myself since I'm early on in my motherhood, parenthood journey, and I feel like I'm probably going to be the odd mom in certain circles to call body parts by their names, but I'm okay with that because I know that's going to be for the best well-being of my child. Yeah. So, okay. So we talked a little bit about the period era, teaching girls as preparing them for their first cycle. How then can moms or teachers support people's help girls then in the teens, in the young women era? What resources does Pearl and Thistle have for this age group?
Yeah, so after girls get their first period, the next question is, do they want to learn to start charting their cycles? Now, there's lots of different opinions about that. I am sort of the opinion that I don't care whether a girl wants to chart or not, right?
Mm.
Unless there's a health reason why we need the data to work with the doctor, then she can pick up charting or leave it, whatever. But I do believe very first that girls need to know it's an option in case they want it. And they need to know that it's science based and they need to know how to do it properly. So even in cycle prep for the girls before they get their first periods, we talk about things like healthy, normal cervical fluid and how to tell the difference between this natural, healthy vaginal discharge and then anything that might indicate an infection, right? This is just gaining literacy to help them navigate literal health situations, right? And then in cycle charting for girls, that would be my next step. It's just a handbook and it walks them through in the first 3 years. Your HPO axis is doing this thing where it's building up communication. And so your cycles may be a little bit more irregular. You don't need to be charting for ovulation. You don't need to be looking for certain patterns. Like your body is just figuring this out, and that's normal and healthy. We don't want to put pressure on that. But then once they start ovulating more regularly, then we could say, okay, now your body is at a point where it could be giving us valuable information based on your cycle patterns, where we're ovulating, right? There might be some health concerns that you want to keep an eye on. Teenagers, especially, they may be prone to losing their cycles because of like really high intensity athletics. Growth spurts and things are going to deplete their iron levels. Like there's all sorts of complications with teens. And so we can just give them some basic literacy to begin cycle charting if they want to, if they find a benefit in it. And then for teens also, I think we also have the responsibility as they get a little bit older to contextualize this, right? Now that we know this about our bodies, here's how this could be applied in the context of natural family planning. And so I do have a video course for older teens, and that's for boys and girls, which talks about, okay, here's the basics of human sexual reproduction. Here are the body parts and the functions of the body parts, right? And then here are our cycles. Here's the woman's infradian menstrual cycle. Here's the man's, daily testosterone cycle. And both of these things cause fluctuations. Both of these things happen on these natural levels, right? How we learn to respond to our hormonal fluctuations can make a difference, right? So we both become responsible for becoming literate about our own bodies and then respecting the shifts and the changes of the opposite sex as well. And then that specifically goes into theology of the body, kind of Catholic moral teaching, that sort of thing.
Nice. I started learning to chart when maybe I was 20. I definitely was still in college, dating my now husband, and I just wanted to learn for the sake of health. And through charting, learned that I had low progesterone. And that was such an explanation for so many symptoms I had experienced for many years and years. And I just want to throw this out there that period pain is real pain. And though it may be common, it does not mean it should be normal. And that is your body saying something is off. And now, years later, okay. In discovering I had the low progesterone, I then went to a NAPRO doctor who prescribed me bioidentical progesterone, and that changed my life, like without exaggerating. I began sleeping so much better, not having the painful periods. My cycles were finally stretched out. I had more days in between starting another period. I felt way less irritable and was just an overall happier gal because, my body was starting to be more aligned. And I so wish more girls would start learning way before the wedding day, like way before you're leading up to your wedding. I try to preach to the high heavens that this information cannot hurt you. It can only help you with just learning your body. And like me, I was able to find out that I had low progesterone. And it also gave me some confidence with knowing, just as an unmarried girl, that I was being proactive in trying to do whatever I could to hopefully prevent any future pregnancy losses, any future miscarriages. And I felt like just really just so good that I was being proactive in my health for future children, God willing. And yeah, that's just like my pitch to all the girls out there of like, learn now. And I definitely think I feel like there's so many girls who try to start learning like 3 months or 2 months before their wedding, and then you have only like less than a
If that
handful.
even
Yeah,
sometimes. Oh my
exactly.
goodness.
And then you only have like less than a handful of cycles to try to learn. And then you're stressed out from all the wedding planning. I mean, I assume other brides are too. You're stressed
Yes,
out,
ma'am.
and I feel like you don't get a true good opportunity to learn your body. I mean, we're called to be open to life. That is the name of this podcast. But I just think like, gosh, I wish girls would just start learning years before family planning is ever on the table.
Yeah.
So,
And that's what I love too about that term body literacy and kind of bringing it back to that, because
yeah.
I have a number of kids at this point who have made that transition from, not being literate to now being literate. And I understand what a process that is. And so I started thinking to myself, I was like, the analogy here is that if we begin learning about our cycles right in proximate marriage prep or even right after we get married, right? The problem is that it's like we're trying to work with Shakespeare, but we have never even learned the alphabet. We can barely put together some words or some sentences, right? So we can be more intentional about building out a literacy progression where we build on concepts and we give girls and even young men time to understand the complexity of this beautiful bodily function.
In your opinion, how can learning to chart for health, not specifically for avoiding or achieving pregnancy, how can learning to chart change a woman's relationship with her body?
Boy, that depends a lot on what your relationship is with your body before. But in a very, I mean, I'll just share a very sort of dramatic change that I have been privy to know about one particular woman. So there is a woman who is actually a religious sister who is a friend of mine. And she and I were chatting about this, and she charts her cycle. And I was like, that's great. So we were talking about how we would like to get more religious women access to this information and doing it.
Yeah.
And she shared with me that learning to chart her cycle, obviously with no intention of, like family planning applications, for her has actually been a way to reclaim a sense of peace and autonomy with her body after experiencing trauma in her body. That, like, this process of learning to listen and learning to trust the signs that her body gives her has been incredibly healing in some of that work that she's been doing. That sticks out to me as a particular example of something that maybe not everybody would articulate and is not going to be a universal experience for women who have experienced any sort of trauma in their bodies, but is one way that this particular woman really experienced a change. So, like, I can see that. Right. And in general, I also think that just learning to understand our cyclical patterns, there is so much grace and peace that can come from understanding, why do I feel this way
Yeah.
at a certain time, being able to name that, and then also to say, I'm not weak. I am not less than. I am not imperfect because I have fluctuations. That is something that a lot of women, regardless of marital status or family planning intentions, could probably benefit from, because that's not a message that we are invited to receive or to live out in our daily lives in most of our situations that we're living and working in today.
Yeah. I have a friend who at the time was discerning religious life. Not sure if she still is, but girlfriend, if you're listening, I think you know what God's calling you to. But I remember a few years ago her telling to me that she was going to start learning to chart. And at the time, I made a comment like, what do you need to learn that for? Because I knew she was hopefully going to go into religious life. And now I look back and I can't believe I said that. I think that was so ignorant of me, because whatever your state of life is, whatever your vocation is, like you just touched on, this is such good information for you to know and love your body. And when I was in my own marriage prep, if I could call it that.
That was interesting little scare quotes there. Maybe we should hear about that.
Well, yeah, because my husband and I, we got married at a Byzantine Catholic church. So I'm Eastern Catholic, and at least at my parish at the time, just the East is kind of just more, I don't know, the spirit flows. And I feel like it's not as rigid and so much rules like in the West. So like at the East, we had a 5-month engagement instead of what I understand to be a Roman 6-month minimum engagement. And I think we only met with our priest like twice, and there wasn't any requirements of us. And I don't think we even needed to meet with him twice. And so that's why I put the air quotes on the marriage prep. And he only mentioned NFP like once to us in passing. So if it had not been for just my own desire to learn fertility awareness, I don't think I would have gotten it from my Eastern Catholic parish at the time. And so so that was my experience, and that's why I put the air quotes up. And I'm just curious, in your opinion, of how maybe can parishes better support Catholic couples wanting to practice NFP in real life, and maybe not just during marriage prep, if you're lucky to hear about NFP in marriage prep?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few places that are pretty low-hanging fruit for making a big impact. And I think a lot of the times when we put everything in like the marriage prep basket for NFP, we're missing a whole lot. Because there are people who are converting or coming into the church. They're going through RCIA, they're going through convalidation prep and all of that kind of stuff. Are they hearing about NFP? Are they being invited to learn about it? In most cases, I've found no. So like, okay, let's do that for the adults who are there. I also think that even if we are thinking about marriages, right, it's the wrong thing to just assume that NFP is all about postponing pregnancy, right? The natural family planning is actual real family planning in the sense that the same body of knowledge is required if you're going to try to postpone a pregnancy or if you want to actively try.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you don't need to know NFP to try and have a baby. We know that. But if you have fertility concerns, right? Or if you happen to be getting married a little bit later in life and you want to try and have a family as quickly as possible, learning about fertility patterns and things like progesterone levels like can be a hugely impactful thing. And I think priests, even if they're hesitant to bring up NFP for whatever reason, in the context of family planning to postpone pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, should they feel empowered to spread the good news of how NFP can help these couples who really need to know this so that they can help try and conceive, right? What a grace for them to be able to understand the need there. And then beyond that, I think just we drop the ball when we preach NFP and then we don't offer any support, right? So like if we're in a parish and we need to give options for NFP for one thing. It can't just be like the one person that offers it and there's no options, right?
Yeah,
we need
yeah.
to find a method that works for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then also when people are going through transitions, like postpartum, right? Or perimenopause, or after a medical diagnosis, or after their instructor stops teaching, or anything, they need more access to instructors and to programs. And a lot of times they may need financial help, right? Because NFP instructors, they have to pay training fees, they have to pay continuing education credits, they have to pay for all sorts of other things, right? They can't be giving away all of their time for free. But the church could be helping them remain active and effective instructors for longer if we help people with financial resources to support that learning environment. So there's just I feel like there's a lot of things that we could be doing in addition to kind of beginning to think more about that literacy model and how as a parish we could be offering some of these workshops or programs or resources kind of before marriage prep, before NFP really.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a gap that a parish ministry, the church could try to fill in, which is the finances to support our fertility educators and to be able to help couples who, if you're newly married, I don't know many newlywed couples who are thriving in those first few months or year of marriage to be able to learn. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely would love to see our Catholic parishes step up. But I know it's one of those of, well, if I'm feeling the call, then it's probably me who should step up and help my parish, you know.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing is that parishes, right, there's no one way to do it. And so I've seen in parishes, I know that there's one parish that I worked with a while ago, and they had a Catholic Women's Council. They were blessed to have a
Ooh,
really
okay.
big group of Catholic women that were kind of like stewards for these funds for the parish. And they would do retreats and they
Wow.
would do these social things. And they committed a certain percentage of their funding to supporting NFP instruction in their parish. Amazing.
That's
Or like if you
amazing.
have a Knights of Columbus group, for example, right? I know they are very active in the pro-life space, but
Yeah,
how many
yeah.
Knights of Columbus groups have ever said, let's do an NFP supplies drive? Let's see how many clear
Okay.
blue fertility monitors or temp drops we can purchase for our parish and give them
Yes.
to
I
people.
love that.
So, I think it doesn't have to just be the parish staff,
Yeah, yeah.
right? I think different parish councils and sub councils and groups can also make a huge impact because even if you're only having, it may only be like 4 or 5 couples in the parish per year that really, really need some help, but boy, you can make a huge difference with kind of minimal individual impact if you all chip in a little bit and help
Yeah.
them out. We just have to be willing to have these conversations at the parish, recognize that there's a need, and then be willing to offer the support.
Wow, I love all those ideas. And that reminds me of something I saw in one of your courses that there was a statistic you had that about 50% of couples who use NFP versus couples who don't, in a few months span of time, the couples who use NFP, about 50% of that, or 50% more were able to achieve pregnancy versus the couples who were not using NFP.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. When we look at those stats, so like if a couple is experiencing fertility issues, for
Mhm.
example, standard medical practice is to say, we'll see you after a year, right? Because we know that when we're just having what's called random acts of intercourse, right? You reach about a 90% fertility rate after about a year. Okay. And so that's the time. But if we look at people who understand their fertility and they know
Mhm.
how to properly time acts of intercourse to maximize their chance of conception, we hit 88% by 6 months, right? So you almost
Mm.
have the amount of time to
Mhm.
get almost that same statistic. So, if you're a couple that's 41 years old and you feel like the clock is ticking, you don't want to wait a year
Yeah.
before you get help,
Mhm.
right? Like you can work with an NFP instructor, you can work with a restorative reproductive medical professional who's going to take
Mhm.
you seriously at 6 cycles rather than 12. It gets you help a lot faster.
Yeah, I really wish more people knew about this world of fertility awareness, body literacy, and the doors that it can open to restorative medicine and root cause healing medicine that can help with the unsolved mystery, the infertility.
Yeah, undiagnosed infertility.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That it's so much more affordable and more successful compared to IVF. So I hope as time goes on that the restorative reproductive medicine will become more mainstream
Mhm.
and popularized for couples who are having trouble achieving pregnancy.
Well, and
Well,
to go back to your point though
uh-huh.
before about like how does this look different when people just know about body literacy? What sorts of conclusions would they come to differently or how could we start reaching this consensus as a pro-life community? I think in general we could also ask how different would our medical system look if every woman already knew how to read her cycle.
Yeah.
You know?
That'd be a different world. But it's possible. And I have this radical hope that it can be a part of our future and that abortion can be a part of our past. And hopefully birth control can be a part of our past too. And that body literacy will also be a part of the future, just this normalized part of life that everyone grows up knowing, loving, understanding the cycle, knowing they have the choice, the option to start charting and a dream.
I know, I'm with you there.
Yeah. How do you see Pearl and Thistle's mission as maybe part of the wider pro-life movement or Catholic witness?
Well, that's such a big question. Wow. I mean, I think just as a person who feels very much a part of the pro life culture and movement, just, I mean, maybe directly from having worked in pregnancy resource centers and done some of these things in the past,
Yeah.
it just seems like a natural extension, right? In the sense that if we really want pro life to be about more than anti abortion, which anti abortion, I mean, that's big in and of itself, right?
Mhm.
But if we really truly want pro life to be pro whole person, to be pro woman, pro child, pro family, pro flourishing of life, I think we need to first understand and take seriously what a woman is and the power of her fertility. And just instill in society a respect for that. And I see body literacy as one way that we do that.
What are some misconceptions you think that people still have about their bodies, fertility, NFP?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Number one, it's interesting because in the secular world, we kind of toe this line of saying, like, oh, NFP is unscientific. It's just the rhythm method. There's no real science behind it. But then also, it's too complicated for women. And I'm like, wait a minute, which
You're
is
right. Oh my gosh,
Which
you're
is it?
so right. I've definitely heard both those extremes. You're right.
Yeah, it's either unscientific and not complicated, right? Or it's way too complicated and women can't reasonably be expected to do this.
Wow.
I think ultimately the thing there is that they're saying reasonably people can't be expected to abstain from sex. That's a whole other issue about the human person and virtue, and we don't have time for that. But when it comes to actual like NFP efficacy and why it is or isn't a viable option for couples, I don't buy either of those things, right? That's a common misconception that's there. I think in the space of the church, there's a lot of things depending on how a particular person understands the magisterium and the teaching of the church, right? I think that some people in the church do see NFP as backwards and kind of unscientific and a relic, you know, and part of the patriarchy. And I hope our conversation has kind of proven that that's really not a place to start with NFP. But on the opposite side, that NFP is just exactly the same as other types of contraception, right? We default to a sort of consequentialist view that the church never intended for NFP. And we have a misunderstanding of kind of the morality of the acts involved and the virtue and the sacrifice involved in natural family planning that is inherently different from other forms of pregnancy planning, right? And then also, a lot of the clergy think that it's free, right? They don't understand that instructors need to get paid or that materials cost money, right? Unfortunately, I do see that. And then there was one more that I was going to say, because there's a whole big long list, but it's dropped off my mind, so it probably wasn't important to say.
Wow. Those are all such
So many.
good points on misconceptions. I've definitely heard both those things of like, well, it just seems so hard to learn. And I try to tell people like once you pick up these habits, it becomes second nature, like brushing your teeth or when you do change your pad or your menstrual disc, like it's just a part of what you do and you don't really think about it as this burden. And then I think there definitely are the people who think it's your grandma's rhythm method and well, I just have the app on my phone. Like, doesn't that tell me the same thing? Like, no, it's an It's not really telling you. It's not. You can't pee on your phone and the app tell you where you're at. Like, no.
At least not yet.
Yeah, maybe. So we've talked about the cycle prep for the young girl and encouraging girls throughout their teen years and the young woman and then the couple. And I want to ask you, what is the role of body literacy in postpartum, perimenopause, or medical situations when women may feel confused or let down by their bodies?
Oh boy. So number one, I think, again, what you're just going to hear me harp on is that women who are empowered to know their bodies from the time that they start cycling are just going to have a better sense of when things are off. I see this time and time again, right? That women who know their bodies and know their bodies' cues, especially postpartum, when things are crazy anyway, right? So if you're listening and nobody's ever told you that fertility signals postpartum when you're breastfeeding can be crazy town, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I do notice that women who have been comfortable with charting for a long time before postpartum can more quickly identify signs of postpartum depression, which I think is hugely important.
Mm-hmm.
Just so very important for a lot of reasons. But then they just have a lot more confidence kind of navigating that transition and understanding their body as things come back to cycling, right? And then in perimenopause, again, understanding what is normal for our bodies to experience during this time, and then kind of what goes outside that experience of normal and really is a time when you should be getting help from a doctor. I think there, especially in perimenopause, there's this weird sort of like everything is medicalized or we're afraid to medicalize anything.
Okay.
If that makes sense, right? Like if you're of the sort of personality that you've been on the pill your entire life and all of a sudden things are changing, you're probably just going to stay on the pill and you may do some hormone replacement therapy all the way throughout. You may not notice much, right? You may get an estrogen cream. I don't know, right? But the women who are on the other side, sometimes Catholic women are actually afraid of taking advantage of hormone supplementation or things like that because they're afraid that this is somehow violating our church's teaching on family planning.
Interesting.
Right? So, like, just like you were able to get progesterone support when you saw that on your charts, there are natural times when, like, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need hormonal support. But maybe in this case, we actually do. Right? And so I think also body literacy in the sense of knowing what's normal, being able to articulate deviations from that, and then feel comfortable getting the sort of help that will naturally support our cycles. I think a lot of Catholic women need that. They need to be told that that's a viable option and that that's okay.
Yeah. So, how has your faith informed your work in this space and your ministry of Pearl and Thistle?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be fully transparent that if I weren't Catholic, I'm not entirely sure that I would have been all that interested in NFP and fertility awareness in the first place. Like,
Yeah.
it seemed so foreign to me, and at first it seemed like a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And there have definitely been times where I think, man, it would be easier to just pop a pill, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. But at the end of the day, I know that that's coming from frustration and that's coming from some fear and some other things that I'm working through. And the fact that the church asks me to trust and honor my body, even when things are tough, that has been a real foundation for me.
Mm-hmm.
That the church asks us to honor the natural design of our bodies, I think is something that I am growing an appreciation for every day and is something that I try to work into everything at Pearl and Thistle because I think it's such an important message that the church's teaching ultimately is not about like science and medicine and hormones are bad. It's that God designed your body in an intentional way and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And part of being a creature and being humble is receiving that goodness even when it's hard.
So, what encouragement can you give to women or young girls, newlyweds, tired moms who are struggling to trust or understand their bodies?
Well, I would just say, I've been there, and you are not a failure, and you are not less holy if you are wrestling with things. I think if anything, the opposite is true, right? Look at Jacob and the angel, right? We're asked to wrestle with things, and that's a part of our journey in holiness. That doesn't make it easy. That doesn't make it easy. But it is encouragement that we receive from the Lord in that. And so I've worked with a lot of women who, in their own NFP practice, for many reasons, they've struggled, whether that's with their cycles themselves, with a relationship with their husband and the communication that's entailed, with differences of opinion and discernment, all these sorts of things. It can be a source of tension.
Yeah.
It can. That's a real thing. But in order to serve the church, I am just going to plug something if I can. I wrote a book called The Language of Your Body, Embracing God's Design for Your Cycle. And I'm going to just put it up here. It's backwards, but whatever. But that book really puts forward, I think, what I want to say to all the women who are struggling with that, which is that our faith has a rich treasure trove of ways that we can heal from a lot of these. I don't want to say that the church can take away our wounds, because that's not good theology. Jesus's wounds didn't go away.
Yeah.
Right? But the church can sanctify our wounds in many ways. So the first part of the book is really exploring women's bodies and how they are part of the way that we image God. And then the second part of the book is practically, how can this make a positive difference in our understanding of ourselves, in our cultivation of virtue and prayer habits, and in our relationships with other people? Because all of those things are impacted by our cycles, right? It's not in your head. Literally, your relationships are impacted by your hormones, and that's okay, right? That's totally okay.
Yeah. I feel like one thing I feel like maybe I struggle with is in trying to make the pitch for people to get off birth control and do NFP, but then also wanting to be transparent about sometimes the things that are good for us are hard. And I just would love would love to hear your thoughts to that. Maybe how could I make a secular pitch or a pitch to even my Protestant friend who would not agree, subscribe to Catholic theology? Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm just curious to get your insight.
Yeah, I mean,
how can I, make the pitch, but also keep it real? Yeah, it's hard at times.
That's interesting. I mean, I think I would have to just draw from some things that I've seen from other secular fertility awareness approaches, because there is a real sense in there's a movement there, and there's something very real and tangible there for women who do not have a religious underpinning to their charting practices, but just really do it because they feel like it's the right thing to do. So things that I have heard women say that are completely a-religious would be that it's feminist, right? It is feminist to expect that our bodies are normative, right? And to expect that we are respected in all spheres in the normal function of our bodies. You could look at it from the standpoint of no chemicals, right? It's kind of depending on which NFP method, you could talk about it being green. I've heard people object to things where you use test sticks or stuff as not being as green, right? So that's a consideration.
Interesting point.
Yeah. But then also just, I think there's this real movement of biohacking, right? We're really big right now into biohacking. And I want to approach that with caution, because again, I feel like that's not, from a Catholic point of view, we're not trying to hack our bodies. We're trying to understand and respect our bodies. But maybe from a secular standpoint, and maybe just taking the term and what it represents, which is basically learning how our bodies work and learning how to work with our bodies. That could be an approach, an entry into dialogue that we could take as well.
Nice. Well, I know we are winding down on our time together, and one question I want to ask all my guests is, Do you have any advice that you can give either to the girl the single mom who finds herself in an unexpected pregnancy, or the practicing NFP couple who finds themselves with an NFP surprise? What advice can you give to encourage them to be open to life?
Oh my goodness. I love this question so much. And I think the encouragement that I would offer is what I saw done so well in a lot of the women that I worked with before, which was that we have space for you. That you are welcome here in all of your messiness, and whatever you're feeling right now, we're here and we have space for you. And you are allowed to take up this space in whatever you're feeling and whatever support you need right now. And I really hope that our church and the world is a place where there is space, where people feel and open to be received in their vulnerability, because it's hard. It is hard. But whenever we do something hard, we should know that we have people there to receive us and to support us. Right. So, what I would say is, I have space for you in my limited capacity. I will pray for you. And if there's anything I can do, you know, you're allowed to take up space.
Wow, I love that. I want to ask you about your time working at the pregnancy centers. What was that like? How did you take up space there at the
Yeah,
PRCs?
it was amazing. So I had the opportunity over the summers. I did my undergrad at Notre Dame, and
Oh, very cool.
they have summer service opportunities. And so I took advantage of that a couple summers in a row, and I ended up working at the Women's Care Center, which was local to the South Bend community, and just learned so much from them, really, and got to know the local community outside of the college campus a lot better that way. And so I did that for a couple of summers. And then after I graduated, I also stayed on and helped them there as well. And it was just so life giving to be able to learn and to know that I was part of that support network. But I have to be honest that ultimately, like, I learned a lot about myself in that, because I was working as one of the counselors there, and I carried a lot with me home. The more seasoned women who were there were very good about, like, receiving people and making space in the moment, but not taking it home with them. And I didn't have that ability to do that. It was very, very heavy work for me. A lot of times it was very rewarding, but there were other things that were just really hard. And so I did learn about my own capacity and my own limits, right? And also kind of ways to separate a little bit, which has helped me as an NFP instructor, because you need to remain effective and you need to make sure that you're creating a space for people without taking it all on yourself, right? And I see a lot of NFP instructors struggling with that in a very similar way as to how I did many years ago.
Well, so a transferable skill.
Yes.
I hope in the future that in this future where everyone's default is pro-life, and hopefully we're moving towards a future with no birth control, I hope that our pregnancy resource centers will also be a huge key player in making this pro-life, pro-body literacy world. I definitely would love to see more pregnancy centers to hopefully step up in this space of offering body literacy charting to the young girls, especially if they're finding themselves in unexpected pregnancies.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Christina, tell us, are there any upcoming projects, new resources, or events for the people to know about?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like there's always something going on. But I will just plug that recently we have started kind of releasing more resources that are for NFP educators, recognizing that there's a lot of mission partners that are like ready to go, and all you need is a ready-made resource. So we did just release through Pearl and Thistle that cycle charting for girls handbook that I mentioned earlier. We actually do have a leader presentation kit for that, so that if you wanted to take that kit and to go into your local youth group or to a high school or your homeschooling co-op or whatever it is, and to just present this information to the girls, we have the ability for you to do that. So we're starting to think more a little bit about how to equip these people that are already doing such amazing work. And all you need is just a little extra resource to get you into that next kind of demographic, into that next space where you can make an impact.
Awesome. So where can listeners go to find you, learn more, or get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've tried to make everything simple. My business name is Pearl and Thistle. So the website is pearlandthistle, all spelled out.com. Instagram, Facebook at Pearl and Thistle. So any of those places you can subscribe to newsletters, check out our courses, our books, everything there.
Great. And I gotta ask you, part of the name of your business was inspired by your saint relative. Am I getting that right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, you
what's the story there? Tell us.
So, St. Margaret of Scotland was known as the Pearl of Scotland. Her husband, Malcolm Canmore, is represented by the thistle because that's the Scottish royal national symbol. And we found out, when did we find out? Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, that our family lineage actually goes straight back to St. Margaret of Scotland. And so that's how I named my business after her, because I already had a great devotion to her. She was
Wow.
already somebody who was in my life in many different ways. And so I thought, okay, all right, like this is a way to kind of bring her actively into the work that I'm doing. And their marriage and their family life was such an inspiration for me. And Margaret, such an inspiration for me, that I just kind of felt like they should be honored in the ongoing work that I'm doing.
Wow. What is St. Margaret of Scotland known for? Is she a patroness of anything?
I actually don't know if she has specific patronage beyond needlework. So she was well known as a seamstress, and in particular, a lace making or embroidery technique. And so I know that she is the patroness of seamstresses and
Oh,
needlework. Yeah.
uh-huh. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christina. Do you have
Thank
any
you.
last thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I just want to say thank you for this. I'm excited that you're opening up these conversations and so grateful to be a part of it. So just thank you for all of your work.
Yeah, I really hope that this can be the beginning of bridging the space of pro-life movement meets body literacy world. And I hope that there can be that bridge one day and the gap to be filled.
Love it. I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and you have a good evening.
Thank you.